What would you do if the person you loved walked away from you, just because of your appearance? What if, after everything, you had the power to make them regret their decision? This is a story of heartbreak, transformation, and revenge. Watch until the end to see how one woman turned her pain into her strength and got the ultimate payback. You won't believe what happens next. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible stories like this. Nina and Daniel had been married for 6 years. At first, their life together had seemed like a dream. They were both in their late 20s, building careers, traveling, and starting to talk about starting a family. But somewhere along the way, their perfect life began to unravel. Nina wasn't a supermodel, but she was always comfortable in her skin. She loved food, especially Nigerian dishes, pounded yam, jollof rice, and her favorite, goat meat pepper soup. She wasn't a size 2, but she had curves and always knew how to carry herself. Daniel never seemed to mind. In fact, he always told her how beautiful she was, how he loved her curves. But somewhere along the line, Daniel began to change. He stopped complimenting her the way he used to. His eyes started lingering on other women, slimmer women, women with flat stomachs and sharp cheekbones. Nina began to notice it, but she brushed it off. She told herself she was just being paranoid. Then came the day that shattered her world. One evening, Daniel came home late. He had a gift for her, a beautiful bracelet she had been eyeing for months. Nina was touched, thinking this was his way of making up for his long hours at work. But after dinner, as they sat together on the couch, the conversation took a turn. "I think we should talk," Daniel said, his voice unusually flat. "About you?" "Me?" Nina asked, her heart beginning to race. "You've gained a lot of weight lately," Daniel said, his voice cold but calm. "I've been patient, but I'm starting to wonder if this is how it's going to be forever." Nina froze. The words hit her like a slap in the face. "What do you mean, Daniel?" Her voice was small, hurt. "I'm just being honest, Nina. I'm not attracted to you anymore." "I can't keep pretending like everything's okay," he said, avoiding her gaze. Her mind went blank. She had always felt loved by him, secure in the knowledge that their bond was unshakable. But now, the truth was out. Daniel was leaving her. For someone else. A woman he had met at work. Someone slimmer. Someone more his type. "You're leaving me for her, aren't you?" Nina's voice trembled with a mix of anger and disbelief. Daniel didn't answer, and that was all she needed to know. "I don't want to be married to you anymore," Daniel said, his voice low. "I need someone who can keep up with me, someone who's attractive in a way that works for me." Nina's heart shattered in that moment, but it wasn't the betrayal that hurt the most. It was the sting of rejection. It was the way he made her feel like she was too much, like she was unworthy of love because of her weight. That night, Nina lay in bed, crying silently. She felt worthless. She questioned everything about herself. How could someone she had loved so deeply throw everything away so easily? But that night, something inside her changed. She wasn't going to let this define her. Nina didn't need Daniel. She needed to rediscover herself. The first few days after Daniel left were a blur of tears, anger, and sleepless nights. Nina didn't know what to do with herself. She stayed in bed for hours, scrolling through social media, watching old videos of herself and Daniel, laughing together, traveling, making plans for the future. But then, she realized that the only way to heal was to stop looking backward. She had to move forward, and that meant reclaiming her life. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was done wallowing in self-pity. One morning, she woke up and stood in front of the mirror. She hadn't looked at herself this way in a long time. She wasn't just looking at her reflection, she was looking for a spark, something to ignite her. And there it was. The woman staring back at her was strong, even if she hadn't realized it before. She was tired of feeling ashamed. The first step was the gym. It wasn't just about losing weight, it was about proving to herself that she could do something for her own happiness. She had always been active before, but she had let herself go over the past few years. Now, she was going to get back to her roots, to the confident, vibrant woman she had once been. At first, it was hard. Her body wasn't used to the workouts. She felt exhausted, sore, and frustrated. But she pushed through. Every day, she showed up. Slowly, she started to see changes, not just in her body but in her mindset. She was beginning to feel powerful again, like she could take on the world. Her friends noticed the change, too. They complimented her on her newfound energy, her renewed passion for life. They saw the way she was taking control. But what really surprised them was the fire in her eyes. Nina wasn't just transforming her body, she was transforming her life. Every time Nina hit a setback, every time she felt like giving up, she reminded herself of the promise she made: this is for me. Not for Daniel. Not for anyone else. For me. Months passed, and Nina became unrecognizable, not just in appearance, but in attitude. She had transformed into a woman who owned her space, who commanded attention with just a glance. She didn't need validation from anyone anymore. She was confident, fit, and most importantly, she was happy. The weight loss was noticeable. Nina had shed more than 40 pounds. But the true transformation was in how she carried herself. She walked with purpose, dressed in clothes that made her feel powerful, and looked at life through a new lens. Nina began to thrive. She took on new projects at work, joined a book club, and even started dating again. Her friends were amazed by her transformation, physically and emotionally. They saw a new woman emerging, one who was living for herself, not for anyone else's approval. But despite all her growth, there was one thing that lingered: Daniel. He hadn't contacted her since he left, but she knew he was watching. She had heard through mutual friends that he was struggling in his new relationship, that things weren't as perfect as he had hoped. One night, after a particularly successful event where Nina spoke as a guest panelist, she received a message from an unknown number. It was Daniel. "I made a huge mistake," the message read. "Can we talk? I want to apologize for how I treated you." Nina felt a surge of emotions. But she knew what she had to do. The day of the meeting arrived. Nina and Daniel agreed to meet at a quiet cafe, the kind of place where people went to talk, to discuss life's heavy matters. Nina dressed carefully. She wasn't dressing for him, she was dressing for herself. She wore a form-fitting red dress that accentuated her transformation. She didn't care about looking perfect, she cared about looking powerful. When she walked into the cafe, Daniel was already sitting at a table, nervously scrolling through his phone. He looked up as she entered, and his face instantly paled. He looked at her like he didn't recognize her, like she was someone else. "Nina," he stammered, standing up. His eyes couldn't seem to meet hers. "Hi, Daniel," she said calmly, sitting down without hesitation. She could see the guilt in his eyes, the recognition that the woman sitting in front of him was no longer the same one he had left behind. "I've missed you," he said, his voice low. "I made a huge mistake. I was a fool to leave you. I regret it every day." Nina sat back in her chair, folding her arms. "You don't get to say that, Daniel. You don't get to walk back into my life just because you've realized you messed up. You had no problem walking out on me when I was too fat." His face flushed with embarrassment. "Nina, I was wrong. I didn't see your worth, but now I realize." "You realize what?" she interrupted, leaning forward. "That I've lost weight? That I've become more attractive? Is that why you're here?" Daniel opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Nina could see his panic, his desperation. He had thought he could leave her for someone younger, thinner, only to realize she was the one who had been holding him up all along. But she wasn't going to let him off the hook. "You left me because I wasn't good enough for you. You thought you could have someone better. And now, you want me back?" She shook her head. "No. I'm not some prize you can win back when it suits you." Daniel looked down, his eyes full of regret. But Nina didn't feel sorry for him. The tables had turned. "I've moved on, Daniel," she continued. I've become stronger. I've become better than I ever was with you. You don't get to come back into my life and undo what you did. I'm not that woman anymore." She took a deep breath, standing up to leave. But before she turned to walk away, she looked back at him one last time. "You made a choice. And now, I get to make mine. My life is better without you, and I'm going to keep it that way." With that, Nina walked out of the cafe, leaving Daniel behind to stew in the consequences of his actions. She had done it, she had taken her power back, not through revenge in the way he had expected, but by showing him that the best revenge was living a life he could never have. Nina had finally learned her worth, and nothing, not even Daniel, could take that away from her. After walking out of that cafe, Nina felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. It was as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders, a burden that had held her back for far too long. She had taken control of her life and shown Daniel what she was capable of without him. As the days passed, Nina threw herself into her career with newfound vigor. Her design agency was flourishing. Her clients praised her creativity, her passion, and her drive. She started collaborating with bigger names in the industry, and before long, her work was being featured in major magazines. She had everything she wanted: a successful career, a strong sense of self-worth, and a circle of friends who truly supported her. But while Nina was thriving professionally, there was still one part of her life that was missing: romance. Despite all of her achievements, part of her still yearned for a relationship. She was proud of how far she had come, but there were nights when she found herself lying awake, wondering if she would ever find someone who truly saw her, someone who loved her for who she had become, not just the woman she was when Daniel had first met her. One evening, as she attended an event for a new product launch, she was introduced to someone who would change everything. His name was Adebayo, and he was a well-known entrepreneur in the tech space. Adebayo was confident, well-spoken, and charismatic. But what stood out to Nina the most was the way he saw her. Not just as a successful woman, but as someone with depth, someone who had been through the fire and come out stronger. Their connection was instant. They spent the entire evening talking, laughing, and getting to know each other. Adebayo listened to Nina's story without judgment. He understood her pain but saw her strength. He didn't try to fix her, instead, he admired her resilience and ambition. For the first time in a long while, Nina felt seen. Not because of how she looked or what she could do for someone else, but for who she truly was. In the weeks that followed, Nina and Adebayo began spending more time together. They went on dates, explored new places, and shared stories of their pasts. It felt easy, comfortable, and most importantly, it felt right. Months passed, and Nina had completely healed. She no longer thought about Daniel every day. She no longer wondered if he would come crawling back. She had moved on in every sense of the word. Her life was full, and her heart was ready for something real. One evening, as Nina and Adebayo sat on a rooftop overlooking the city, he turned to her, his eyes soft and warm. "Nina," he said, taking her hand, "you've been through a lot. But look at you now. You've grown in ways most people can't even imagine. I'm proud of you." Nina smiled, a genuine smile that came from the depth of her soul. "Thank you, Adebayo," she said, squeezing his hand. "I didn't know if I could ever get here. But I did. And I did it for me. Not for anyone else." Adebayo leaned in, kissing her softly on the lips. Nina knew that this moment was the culmination of everything she had worked for: the emotional growth, the self-love, and the realization that she was worth more than what anyone else thought of her. And then, the doorbell rang. It was Daniel. Nina had no idea how he had gotten her address. Her heart skipped a beat, but she didn't panic. She had come so far. The door opened to reveal Daniel, looking exactly how she remembered him: disheveled, lost, and desperate. His eyes locked on hers, but instead of the anger or regret she might have expected, there was a deep sense of sadness in his gaze. I had to see you," Daniel said quietly. "I've been miserable without you. I can't stop thinking about the life we had." Nina stared at him for a long moment. She could see the pain in his eyes, but she no longer cared. He had made his choice. and she had made hers. "I'm not the same person you left," Nina said, her voice steady. "And you can't come back into my life because you're lonely or because you regret your decisions. I'm happy now. I'm finally whole, and I'm moving forward with someone who values me." Daniel opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He looked down at the floor, then back at Nina. There was no anger in his eyes anymore, just an overwhelming sense of defeat. "I understand," he said quietly, turning to walk away. And that was the last time Nina ever saw Daniel. As she closed the door behind him, she turned to Adebayo, who had been silent, watching the entire exchange. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. Nina smiled, her heart full. "I'm more than okay. I'm exactly where I need to be." Nina's story wasn't just about losing weight, it was about gaining everything she had lost: her confidence, her sense of self, and her power. She had shown herself and Daniel that she was worth so much more than the superficial judgments others had placed on her. In the end, Nina didn't need revenge. She needed to heal, to grow, and to find love that was genuine. And in Adebayo, she found that love, one that was built on respect, admiration, and a shared understanding of life's challenges. And so, Nina's journey came full circle. She was stronger than ever, not just because of her transformation, but because she had learned to love herself first.